Hello friends, and a warm welcome back to the Slow Living Collective, a podcast about slowing down, living seasonally and embracing an intentional life. I'm Amy, 30-something mum of two, homemaker, home educator and allotment gardener. These podcasts are love notes from me, sharing the things I sometimes need to hear myself. In these episodes, I'm going to delve into what it means to walk a different path, to stepping outside of societal norms and embracing the ever-ending beauty that it provides. From educating our children outside of the school system, living in a small home by choice, surrounding ourselves with a life of intention instead of living a life by default. I welcome you on this journey with me to open your minds to a different way of living. I hope you find what you're looking for within the words of these podcasts, and I hope that they speak to you in your own unique way. Hello everyone, and welcome back to a new episode. It's been a while, right? I loved recording season 1 of the podcast, but I definitely was trying to do all the things at once, and I needed to step back, take a bit of a break and allow myself to slow down and recalibrate. That's one of the great things about slow living and being so in tune with yourself. The way you live and ultimately your needs are so important, and because of that I took a longer break than I anticipated, but it means I'm coming back at what is the perfect time for myself. I have been so humbled with the amount of messages I've received from people on Instagram who have found this podcast, and I am so grateful for all of you who take time out of your lives to listen to my words. I remember when I first started the podcast, it was this brief idea in my head, and within one weekend I had recorded 5 episodes and was there putting it out into the world. I remember my husband said to me at the time that I didn't require any fancy equipment, I just figured it out with what I have got. And nothing has changed. I record using the voice recorder on my phone, I'm sitting on my bed, I have no fancy soundproofing, and I will edit this with the iMovie program on my laptop. For me, simplicity always wins. To me, the words I have to share are the most important part of all this, and the odd distant yell of one of my children downstairs with my husband just adds to the authenticity. Perfection isn't for me, but the beauty of the life I have created by intention is. And that leads us nicely onto today's topic, slow living, and a little bit of seasonal living too. I've obviously covered this before, but for episode 1 of the new season, I thought it would be a great idea to share the beauty of the life we choose to live and why slow and seasonal living have become so important to us. To some extent, slow living has always been there for me. This want to never quite conform to the status quo. When I was growing up, I was schooled through the education system, almost from bottom to top, as I finished up my education with my master's degree as an adult. I did love learning and research, but I never felt quite comfortable with the idea that school was just prepping me for a job. I remember age 14 or 15 thinking there is no way I want to do a traditional job. That just isn't for me. And despite having a few traditional 9-to-5s throughout my 20s, on the whole my working career has always been something that doesn't stick me in an office behind a desk. Nothing against sitting in an office behind a desk, but I just felt like I needed more than that. The jobs that have been most me include my career as air cabin crew and then running my own social media branding business. Things that gave me the freedom I wanted to be who I was always meant to be. These things might seem insignificant, but actually they really do form that early part of my thinking, knowing that the normal status quo just wasn't for me, even as a child when I didn't quite understand it. But these things open up so many avenues of thinking for me as well. Why are we so defined by a job anyway? Why does everyone care about what we do? Why is it always that first question? Oh, what do you do? For me, being happy, content and fulfilled is far more important than anything I can achieve in a workplace or for financial compensation. When I had my first baby in 2019, I heard the same platitudes that we all hear about how time goes so quickly and we must just soak it all in. Let's be honest here, parenting is hard and we absolutely cannot soak it all in every second. And as parents, the last thing we all need to be told is that we're missing out on things. We all have so much on our plates as it is, even when we live slowly or more intentionally. And that raises a really good point. What is slow living anyway? Well, slow living will look different for everyone because we all live different lives. But for me, it is slowing down our life where we can, taking time for connection, embracing simplicity, being mindful, avoiding the rat race, and in some aspects, living outside of or backing against societal structures where we can. It's about being intentional and not just living by default. What slow living isn't is a metric of comparison against anyone else and how they live. The pandemic really brought slow living front and centre in our lives. That period of the first lockdown where we were isolated away from the world. Inside our home, it was just the three of us. Life was slower and easier. We started to rely on doing simple things like baking our own bread, making things that ordinarily we would just purchase from the supermarket. We embraced a period where time stood still, and it felt really good. The pandemic was a hard time for us all for so many different reasons, but this connection to ourselves and our survival really brought home to us how much we wanted to continue to live this way. Of course, there were a number of lockdowns here in the UK, each one a little bit more trickier than the one before, and for the second and third lockdowns, I was pregnant with our little boy. Despite its difficulties, the pandemic showed us clearly that this was the path we were meant to follow, and we've been living this way ever since. Is it always easy? No. But it's a constant work in progress and something we fall in love with over and over each day. Since following a slower way of life, it has opened up many avenues to me or reinforced beliefs I already had. Seasonal living is a path we've been growing along for the last 18 months, living by the wheel of the year, embracing living seasonally, eating seasonally, and living as much as we can from our own produce. We applied for an allotment in 2020 and will soon be celebrating 1 year of our plot. It's been wonderful to learn about allotment growing, having only grown on our balcony before, and I have been a prolific balcony gardener. You can check out my previous episode in season 1 where I talk about the difference between balcony gardening and allotment gardening. We embrace eating seasonally, nourishing our bodies, honouring the seasons, their flow, and how they impact on the way we think and feel. Modern society has us doing the same things, working the same patterns, keeping up the same facade, and eating the same things throughout all 365 days of the year, when really, as with anything, there are ebbs and flows. By embracing these ebbs and flows of life and the seasons, we are able to work with how we feel at any one time. It sounds so simple, but modern life has knocked these simple things out of us, the simple ways that our ancestors used to live. Another thing slow living brought up for me is living in a small home, and I will always say that I live in a small home by choice. It might sound surprising, but I actually don't want to upgrade my home or upgrade my space. Living small is a revelation, and there is so much joy in slimming down our possessions, simplifying, and to some extent minimising too. I absolutely love our home, and I absolutely love finding clever, smart ways to utilise the space that we have. Finances, of course, play an important role too, as part of the way we choose to live is to not stretch ourselves financially and to not always be reaching for the next big thing and stretching to our limit, but instead, if we can, to live a lot under our means. Now, I'm aware of my privilege here, however, in the midst of a cost of living crisis where some people just don't have the luxury to live within their means at all. So I do appreciate how privileged I am to have that choice. I always said that I wouldn't move from here because I love the small space. However, my stance has changed on that slightly due to our building being caught up in the building safety crisis, which, if you don't know, unveiled dodgy practices within the building industry relating to cladding, which came about after the Grenfell tragedy. I always said I wouldn't move. Now, currently, I can't move, but eventually I'll be able to, and I will, but only to another home of a similar size. Small home living ties in perfectly with that simplicity I was talking about, and only living with the things we really need and not clinging on to everything else. As with everything, it's a work in progress, but slowly, we're getting there. These things don't need to be all or nothing. They don't need to be something you strive to achieve in a weekend. They are the quiet things you do in the minutes and seconds of every day. Thank you so much for tuning into today's podcast. I'm so beyond grateful to have you here. Community is so important to me, so I would love to chat with you over on Instagram. You can find me on my account, Life on Plot 44. My podcasting friends have always told me podcasts live and die by their reviews. So if you're able to leave a rating or a review on mine, I would appreciate that so much. And of course, if you're able to share what I do here on your social platforms, I would be so grateful too. Thank you again for tuning in, and I'll be back soon with another podcast.